So, I've been gone for a while due to some unfortunate circumstances, and while I've been gone, they added our newest support, Furia, the Angel of Vengeance. Now, I've been absent on YouTube and Twitch, but I have been keeping up with the game. I've actually played her quite a bit as well, and I want to give my first impressions on her now that the character has been released into the live game. Now, I have to say that this character is very unique. Furia is the perfect blend of support and damage. Like Hi-Rez said, Furia is a very aggressive healer who, like Maldamba, has a pretty high skill ceiling. Maybe not quite as high, but it's up there, and we'll talk more about that later. But anyway, this makes for a very fun character. No other support is really like this. The closest would be Pip, but for the most part, his Mega Potion and Catalyst talents are deciding what side he'll lean more to. While Furia can make use of both her damage and support sides evenly and effectively. But doing that isn't something you often just pick up right away though. I often see Furias focusing too much on damage or too much on healing, and doing either of those things means you're not making full use of Furia. Mastering Furia means you're able to play both of her sides in perfect harmony. If you're only able to play her as a damage, you're better off playing an actual damage character, and if you're only able to play her as a support, you're better off playing a support whose focus is on just healing. So Furia can do a lot for one character, but doing it effectively takes a good amount of time and skill. So does that balance her out, or is Furia OP? I have seen plenty of people say Furia is OP, and I've seen plenty of people say that Furia is pretty weak, surprisingly. I personally think Furia is a bit overtuned, but not outright broken or anything. Furia is pretty manageable. Like I said, Furia can do a lot, but it does take skill to do effectively. Being able to properly manage your damage and support sides is what separates an average Furia from a good Furia. The character also has some pretty big weaknesses. There's no self-sustain in her base kit. You have to dedicate a good amount of your deck to get some reasonably good self-sustain. Her right-click heal is also very buggy. Every support with auto lock-on has a problem where their heal doesn't go to the right person, but Furia has that and more. Sometimes her heal goes right through people, or it does the animation and doesn't heal anybody, or the worst one, where it does the animation, takes the cooldown and doesn't heal the target or any target. It also appears to go around corners and walls when it's not supposed to, so it's all sorts of inconsistent, and inconsistency is the worst thing a character can suffer from, because it gives them an RNG element, and RNG should never be in an FPS like this. Those are really her only weaknesses though. Her healing is really impactful from what I've seen, at least with her right-click talent. It feels like anything less than COT 3 just doesn't do much. I've been on both sides of this, both healing somebody with COT 2 on them, or attacking somebody who gets healed with COT 2 on them. The burst heal just feels that strong, and with the right-click cooldown card it can be put out every 3 seconds. There's even a card that lets you put a low HP personal barrier on whoever you heal. It only goes up to 500 HP, but that is more than enough to affect the time to kill. Her Solar Blessing talent can also make her beam heal for a massive 6,000 per second. But I'm gonna be honest, unless you're able to coordinate this beam with your teammates on comms or something, it's not good. As a support, you're gonna be behind your team, so if you try to beam them, they won't be able to see it coming up from behind them, so they could easily just accidentally dodge it while strafing. It's more often than not pretty unreliable. In a coordinated setting, I see it being insanely overpowered. I can only imagine Solar Blessing with the Immortal Core of Terminus and Anara. Furia also has loadout cards that give cooldown reduction to her beam, so if you don't have Willow, you just lose against that kind of comp. But again, most public games don't have that kind of coordination, so running her right-click talent is much more reliable. Her healing also gets her this thing called Wrath, and Wrath buffs up her fire rate by up to 30%. This is what makes her feel like a damage because full Wrath really buffs up her DPS. It makes her feel like a weaker Leon in a way. Not as much DPS as Leon, not as much range, but a similar fire rate on a hit scan weapon. Her weapon also fires a tight spread of pellets that's bigger than your average Leon or Andro bullet, but still tight enough to land them all consistently. The pellets can hit multiple targets, but you're very rarely going to be able to do that. Then there's her beam. I think this ability is pretty crazy. It's a beam that continuously moves forward, damaging and stunning anyone in it. It can go through anything. Players, walls, barriers, counter, reversal, the only thing that stops you from getting hit by it are abilities that make you untargetable, like Eevee Ice Block, Xin Billow, and stuff like that. Like I said earlier, Furia has cards to lower the cooldown of the beam, so you can be tossing out stuns pretty often. There's also a card that can increase the stun from 1 second to 1.5 seconds. Her talent Exterminate also makes the beam stay in place where you're stunned, and I think that combo is pretty dumb when you take into account how often Furia can throw out beams. And on top of that, there's also a card that increases the radius of the beam. Putting all of your loadout points into the beam like that is far from ideal, but it's a pretty sucky thing to be on the other end of. I'm okay with CC, there's CC reduction to counter it, and this does give Furia a way to effectively defend herself from flanks if she positions herself in a way that makes it hard for incoming flanks to dodge it, but I do think this ability is a bit stacked. Her F is okay, it's a quick burst of movement that only goes behind you, so you can't just instantly escape to the side or anything unless you turn. It does have Seeking Orbs that do deal damage, but this is honestly the most balanced out of all the aimbot abilities we've gotten so far. Since it's projectile and not hit scan, it can be countered by either blocking it or getting behind something. It feels fair, so I don't think there will be any complaints about it like with Leon and Lex. Furia does have a talent that gives her F 2 charges, but that's gimmicky at best. Then there's her ultimate, and I think this is a really good ult. It gives you damage immunity for 2 seconds, lets you float for those 2 seconds, and when those 2 seconds are up, it buffs you and your teammates with 30% movement speed and damage for 8 seconds. Once this is activated, you and your team can do a pretty overwhelming push. It's also easy to combo with almost any other ultimate since it's a flat buff. Imagine an ulting Makoa running at your team with the speed buff and hitting you all for 780 a swing. So Furia does have quite a bit going for her, but again, I don't think the character is super crazy or anything. Definitely seems a bit strong, and I can see her getting a few small nerfs, like one to her ult charge rate for example, because if you're good with her, you're going to be doing both a lot of healing and damage, and that gets you your ult pretty damn fast. I've gotten it twice in a 1.5 minute round before, and that's not really balanced. It is still pretty early, and it's hard to actually say how balanced the character is until the community learns how to play her and play against her effectively. Once that happens, then we can say for sure. But until then, why don't you guys let me know what your first impressions on her are in the comments below. And that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to see you guys later. Bye.